The arrogant commander. The planet Tarsus IV was a quiet human colony until the Xal'Zorath Empire arrived. Their warships covered the sky like a metal storm, and their soldiers marched across the land like an unstoppable wave. At the front of this invasion stood Commander Xal'Zorath, a tall, armored warrior with glowing red eyes and silver-blue skin. She stood on a raised platform inside her command center, overlooking the battlefield below. Through the large glass window, she saw the human settlement, a fragile collection of buildings, roads, and towers. A weak species, she thought. Flesh and bone trying to stand against steel and plasma. Xal'Zorath turned to her second-in-command, General Vek. His dark armor reflected the blinking lights of the control panels. "How many humans are resisting?" she asked. Vek checked the holographic display. "Only a few hundred, Commander. Their weapons are primitive. They are no threat to us." Xal'Zorath smirked. "Then this will be over soon. Let us see how long they last." She tapped a button on her control panel. A transmission signal was sent to the human forces. A large screen flickered on, revealing the face of a human officer, a man with a scared face and determined eyes. "This is Captain Reynolds of the United Earth Defense Force," the human said. His voice was calm, but there was fire in his eyes. "If you're expecting us to surrender, you'll be disappointed." Xal'Zorath laughed, a sharp and cold sound. "Surrender? No, Captain. I don't expect you to surrender. I expect you to die." Reynolds didn't flinch. "Then you don't know humans very well." Xal'Zorath leaned closer, amused. "I have conquered 17 worlds. I have seen warriors twice your size beg for mercy. Your kind will fall like the rest." Reynolds smirked. "Then come and see for yourself." The screen cut to black. Xal'Zorath shook her head. Arrogant fool. He still believed he had a chance. She turned to Vek. "Begin the attack. Crush them." The first strike. The Xal'Zorath forces advanced with perfect precision. Rows of alien soldiers, their armor gleaming under the sun, marched toward the human defenses. Their energy rifles hummed with power. Drones hovered in the air, scanning for weaknesses. In the distance, tanks rumbled forward. Their cannons locked onto targets. From her command center, Xal'Zorath watched as the first volley of plasma blasts rained down on the human barricades. Explosions ripped through the battlefield. She waited for the panic, the surrender, the cries of the weak. But none came. Instead, something strange happened. The humans didn't run. They fought back. Despite being outnumbered, they moved fast and unpredictably. They ducked, rolled, and fired in perfect coordination. The Xal'Zorath were used to enemies breaking formation, fleeing, surrendering. But these humans, they adapted. "Commander," Vek said, his voice uneasy. "The humans are resisting harder than expected." Xal'Zorath narrowed her eyes. "Impossible." She watched as human snipers took positions on rooftops, picking off Xal'Zorath officers with deadly accuracy. Explosions erupted beneath Xal'Zorath tanks, hidden landmines. Human soldiers in exosuits charged forward, using hit-and-run tactics to confuse their attackers. The battlefield wasn't chaos, it was a trap. Xal'Zorath clenched her fists. How could this be? Humans were supposed to be weak, but they fought like warriors who had nothing to lose. Her amusement faded. For the first time, she felt a sliver of doubt. The unexpected counterattack. The Xal'Zorath war machines pushed forward, but the humans pushed back harder. Suddenly, the ground erupted as hidden explosives detonated, sending Xal'Zorath soldiers flying into the air. From the smoke, human soldiers charged like a storm, their weapons blazing. Xal'Zorath's eyes widened. This wasn't desperation. This was strategy. She turned to Vek. "Send in reinforcements." "Now." Vek hesitated. "Commander, we are facing unexpected resistance. Their tactics." "I said now." Xal'Zorath snapped. More Xal'Zorath forces stormed the battlefield. The sky darkened as additional warships arrived, preparing to strike with orbital cannons. This would end now. But on the battlefield, Captain Reynolds only smiled. He raised his radio. Phase 2. Let's show them what humans can do. From the hills beyond the battlefield, something massive emerged. Xal'Zorath's eyes widened as a fleet of human mechs stomped into battle. Their metal feet shook the ground as they raised their cannons. The battlefield lit up with explosions. For the first time in her life, Commander Xal'Zorath felt fear, and the battle had only just begun. The first surprise. Commander Xal'Zorath stood motionless inside her command center, her glowing red eyes locked onto the battlefield below. The humans should have been falling by now. Their structures should have been reduced to ashes, their warriors either dead or begging for mercy. But instead, they fought back. Her fists clenched as she watched the battle unfold. The Xal'Zorath forces had every advantage: superior firepower, advanced technology, and an overwhelming numerical superiority. And yet, the humans refused to break. "This resistance is unusual," said General Vec, shifting uncomfortably beside her. Xal'Zorath narrowed her eyes. "No, it's an illusion." She refused to believe that these fragile creatures were anything more than desperate fools trying to delay the inevitable. She had seen this before, species who clung to hope before their final, humiliating defeat. This was no different. She tapped her wrist console, opening a direct channel to her battlefield commanders. Push forward. Crush them. Show them what happens when they resist the Xal'Zorath Empire. Down below, the alien war machines surged forward. The sky darkened as Xal'Zorath dreadships descended, firing plasma storms onto human barricades. Their shock troopers, clad in black exo-armor, moved like ghosts, silent, merciless, unstoppable. Their battle walkers, towering 10 feet tall, marched forward with heavy plasma cannons, tearing apart buildings with ease. This would be over in minutes. Or so she thought. The unexpected trap. At first, the human defense seemed to crumble. Their barricades collapsed, their vehicles burned, their radio signals filled with static and chaos. Xal'Zorath smirked, as expected. But then, something changed. The humans didn't scatter. They didn't run. Instead, they adapted. "Commander," Vec muttered, his voice tense, "something is wrong." And he was right. From the ruins of the city, human strike teams emerge, organized, fearless, and highly trained. They moved in perfect coordination, like they had been preparing for this moment their entire lives. They had set traps. Explosions ripped through the battlefield as Xal'Zorath tanks rolled over hidden landmines, their once invincible armor torn apart like paper. High above, drones that were supposed to scout human positions suddenly fell from the sky. EMP blasts disabled their systems in an instant. And then came the ambush. Out of nowhere, human soldiers in advanced exosuits struck with pinpoint accuracy, their armor-piercing rounds cutting through Xal'Zorath defenses like a blade through flesh. "Impossible," Xal'Zorath hissed, watching in disbelief. This was no panicked resistance. This was calculated, precise, deadly. They had expected this invasion. They had prepared. A warrior's defiance. In the heart of the battlefield, Captain Reynolds stood tall, plasma rifle in hand, his eyes sharp as he watched Xal'Zorath forces fall back in confusion. A normal commander would have taken the chance to retreat and regroup. But Reynolds, he smirked. "All right, boys," he said through the radio, "let's make them regret coming here." From the rooftops, snipers opened fire, each shot finding a target with deadly precision. From the streets, heavy artillery units rolled into position, unleashing devastating blasts that ripped through Xal'Zorath formations. And then came the most terrifying part of all. The mechs. Towering, heavily armored war machines, built by human engineers to counter superior alien threats, marched onto the battlefield. Their metal feet cracked the ground with each step. Their railguns hummed with power. And then, they fired. The Xal'Zorath forces, once unstoppable, were suddenly outgunned, outmaneuvered, and overwhelmed. Xal'Zorath's realization. Inside the command center, Thyra's fingers dug into the console, her sharp claws leaving marks on the metal. This was not how it was supposed to go. Her warriors were the elite of the Xal'Zorath Empire, trained for centuries in combat, home through war after war, victorious against countless species. And yet, here they were, struggling, losing, to humans. Xal'Zorath gritted her teeth. "This isn't over," she growled. She refused to let it end like this. With a sharp motion, she turned to Vec. "Prepare the Warbringers. We're going in." Vec hesitated. "Commander, is that wise? If we—" Xal'Zorath grabbed him by the throat and lifted him into the air. "Do not question me." Her voice was cold, dangerous. She dropped him, turning back toward the battlefield. If these humans wanted a fight, then she would show them what true power was. Humans don't give up. The battlefield was a storm of chaos and fire. Smoke rose from the crumbling ruins of the once thriving human colony, but its defenders still stood, battered but unyielding. Plasma bolts cut through the air, railgun blasts tore through alien armor, and the metallic echoes of marching war machines shook the ground. Yet, in the center of it all, Commander Xal'Zorath walked forward, her crimson cape billowing behind her. She no longer watched from the safety of her command center. Now she was the storm. Xal'Zorath led her elite warbringers, Xal'Zorath warriors genetically modified for war, their armor reinforced with phase shields, their weapons capable of vaporizing steel. Her forces had suffered a setback, yes, but setbacks were temporary. Victory was inevitable. The face of resistance. On the human front lines, Captain Reynolds surveyed the battlefield, his visor flashing with tactical readouts. His soldiers had crippled the Xal'Zorath attack, but now their true leader had entered the fight. He exhaled. This just got personal. Through the smoke, he saw her. Xal'Zorath, flanked by two towering warbringers, their glowing eyes locked onto him like a predator sizing up prey. A transmission cut through his earpiece. "That's their commander," said Corporal Diaz. "Should we fall back?" Reynolds shook his head. "No. If she's here, it means we've made her mad. Asterisk, 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 we hold the line." His soldiers tightened their grips on their weapons. Fear was there, but so was something else. Determination. No one ran. No one broke. They were human. And humans don't give up. Clash of Titans. Xal'Zorath raised her hand. "Annihilate them." The Warbringers charge, their plasma blades igniting, slicing through the battlefield like living weapons. They moved fast, faster than any human, cutting through wreckage and taking out soldiers in a brutal display of Xal'Zorath combat mastery. Reynolds barely dodged a plasma strike that melted a steel barricade behind him. He rolled, raised his rifle, and fired. The bullets bounced off the Warbringer's shield. Damn. The alien lunged at him, but before it could strike. Boom. A railgun blast slammed into its chest, sending it flying through a collapsed building. Reynolds looked up. One of the human mechs, still burning from previous attacks, had locked onto Xal'Zorath's forces, its cannons glowing hot. "You okay, Cap?" came a voice through the comms. Reynolds smirked. "Better now." The mech fired again, forcing Xal'Zorath's forces into cover. For the first time, Xal'Zorath's confidence wavered. This was not normal. Humans weren't supposed to last this long. They weren't supposed to adapt. But they did. Again and again. And suddenly, for the first time in her entire military career, Xal'Zorath felt something unfamiliar. Doubt. The breaking point. The battle raged on, but now something was different. Xal'Zorath could feel it. Her warbringers were slowing down. Their attacks, once unstoppable, were meeting resistance at every turn. Humans weren't just surviving. They were winning. She saw a Xal'Zorath soldier get cornered by 3 humans. One injured, one reloading, one out of breath. The Xal'Zorath should have cut them down easily. Instead, the injured human tackled him. The one with no ammo used his rifle like a club, and the third dragged them both to cover. It wasn't about strength. It wasn't about weapons. It was about something Cyrus people had never understood. Humans fought for each other, for survival, for a future, and they would rather die than surrender. The unthinkable decision. Xal'Zorath gritted her teeth. She refused to believe this. She couldn't. The Xal'Zorath Empire had conquered countless civilizations, had brought entire star systems to their knees. How? How were humans different? Her warriors were retreating, breaking ranks. Even her most elite soldiers hesitated before charging into battle again. If she pushed forward now, she could salvage some control. But then she thought of something terrifying. If humans were this dangerous now, what would they become in 100 years? 1,000. The Xal'Zorath Empire had always been the dominant force in the galaxy. But now, Cyrus saw something she never expected. For the first time, she wondered, was humanity the future? Retreat, for now. She hated the words, but she spoke them anyway. Fall back. General Vek's voice came through her comms, stunned. Commander, are you? I said fall back. It wasn't just a defeat. It was a warning. As the Xal'Zorath forces fled, leaving behind wreckage and bodies, Cyrus turned back one last time. Through the smoke, she saw Reynolds watching her, rifle lowered. Their eyes met. And for a moment, just a moment, there was understanding. She had laughed at human frailty. Now she feared their strength. This war was not over. But next time, she would not underestimate them. And next time, humanity might be even stronger. A fight unlike any other. The Xal'Zorath Empire had never retreated before. In every war, in every conquest, they had crushed their enemies without resistance. They had burned planets, shattered fleets, and rewritten history with their victories. But today, they had fled. Commander Xal'Zorath sat in the war chamber of her flagship, staring at the holographic battle reports flashing before her. The screens showed footage from the battlefield. Human soldiers dragging their wounded to safety, broken mechs still fighting, snipers taking precise shots despite overwhelming odds. Xal'Zorath's clawed fingers dug into the metal table as she replayed one particular image. Captain Reynolds, standing in the ruins, watching her retreat with that infuriating smirk. Her blood boiled. How? How did these creatures resist her so effectively? How did they fight with such reckless abandon and still emerge victorious? It made no sense. Her empire had spent centuries perfecting warfare. Her soldiers were engineered to be faster, stronger, smarter. The Xal'Zorath war machines were superior in every way. And yet, humans had done the impossible. A broken empire. General Vek entered the chamber, his posture rigid with unease. He knew better than to interrupt his commander when she was deep in thought. Still, he spoke. Commander, he said carefully, our forces are in disarray. The troops are questioning the battle. Xal'Zorath turned, her red eyes burning with fury. Questioning, she hissed. Vek hesitated. We lost too many. And the humans. He took a breath, choosing his words wisely. They were unexpectedly resilient. Xal'Zorath's expression darkened. Resilient? No. This was something far more dangerous. This was not a desperate last stand. This was not luck. This was deliberate. Where is the fleet now? She asked coldly. Regrouping near the outer ring of the Tarsus system, Vek replied. But morale is low. Our warriors are not used to retreating. Neither am I. Tyra growled. Her claws scraped against the metal table, the sound sharp and grating. For the first time in her life, she felt something close to fear. The Xal'Zorath had never fought an enemy like this. An enemy that did not break, that did not surrender, that adapted in real time and turned weakness into strength. The human strategy. On Tarsus IV, Captain Reynolds stood on the remains of a destroyed Xal'Zorath war machine, surveying the battlefield. The sky was still thick with smoke, the air heavy with the scent of burning metal and ozone. Bodies both human and alien, littered the ground. His soldiers were exhausted, battered, and bloodied. But they were alive, and they had won. He lifted his helmet, wiping the sweat from his brow. Behind him, Corporal Diaz approached, limping from an injured leg. "Guess that's what happens when you mess with humans," Diaz said, wincing as he sat on a broken piece of armor. Reynolds let out a dry chuckle. "Yeah, but they'll be back." Diaz sighed. "Figured as much. Think they'll hit harder next time." Reynolds nodded. "Absolutely. Because that was the thing about the Xyrek. They were too proud to accept failure. They would analyze, adjust, and return with even greater force. But humans had been surviving against impossible odds for their entire existence. And next time, they'd be ready too. Inside the mind of the enemy, back on the Xyrek command ship, Thyra turned away from the battle reports and moved toward a massive starlit window, staring out at the dark void beyond. Her empire had always believed in strength above all else. They had never considered that there could be another kind of strength, a species that refused to break, a species that could adapt, overcome, and resist beyond all reason. She had underestimated them once. She would not make that mistake again. Thyra took a slow breath and made a decision. "Prepare my personal war fleet," she ordered. Vex stiffened. "Commander, are you suggesting I am returning to Tarsus IV, personally?" Vex's mouth opened slightly in shock. "But our forces are cowards. They fear an enemy they do not understand. That ends now." She turned, her eyes flashing with a dangerous glint. "If humanity wants a war," she said, "then I will give them one unlike anything they've ever seen." The next stage of war. As Xyrek warships mobilized and new strategies were drawn, back on Tarsus IV, the humans did not rest. They rebuilt. They analyzed Xyrek weaknesses. They improved their technology. They knew the war wasn't over. And neither did Commander Thyra. The next battle would be the most important one yet. It would decide whether humans were the future of the galaxy, or if the Xyrek Empire would crush them once and for all. One way or another, history was about to be rewritten. The moment of doubt. The silence after battle. The battlefield on Tarsus IV had gone eerily silent. The once roaring plasma cannons, the thunder of marching alien boots, the relentless bombardments from Xyrek warships. It was all gone. But the scars of war remained. Captain Reynolds stood at the edge of a ruined city block, staring at the shattered remains of a Xyrek warbringer's armor. Just hours ago, this very spot had been the center of chaos, death, and destruction. Now there was only smoke, the distant crackle of flames, and the hushed voices of human soldiers tending to the wounded. It was a victory, but Reynolds couldn't bring himself to celebrate. The Xyrek had retreated, but they would be back. Stronger, smarter, more determined. The question was, would humanity be ready? A voice cut through his thoughts. "Sir," said Corporal Diaz, limping over. His armor was dented, his face streaked with dirt and blood, but his eyes still carried the same fire as before. "Command wants an update. They're trying to figure out our next move." Reynolds exhaled, shaking his head. "Our next move." He gestured around him. "Look at us, Diaz. We're still counting the dead." Diaz swallowed hard, following Reynolds' gaze. The battlefield was a graveyard of metal and flesh. Human soldiers, barely standing, worked together to lift their fallen comrades onto makeshift stretchers. Engineers rushed to salvage what was left of the damaged mechs. Smoke curled from the husks of destroyed Xyrek tanks. It wasn't just a victory. It was a reminder. Reynolds turned back to Diaz. "We barely survived this time." Diaz nodded slowly. "And next time?" Reynolds clenched his fists. "Next time, we do more than survive." A warrior's reflection. Far above Tarsus IV, deep inside the Xyrek command flagship, Commander Xyrus stood in the silence of her private chamber. The battle had ended. But the war was far from over. She removed her combat gauntlets, running a hand over her metallic armor, where a deep gash ran across her shoulder plate, a scar left by human railgun fire. Xal'Zorath had fought hundreds of wars across countless worlds, but never, not once, had she faced an enemy like this. Never had she doubted her own superiority. And yet, standing here now, the doubt was eating at her. The Xal'Zorath had never retreated before. Until now. Her warriors were whispering. Her officers were questioning. They were afraid. Not of human weapons, not of human technology. They were afraid of something far worse. They were afraid of human resolve. Xal'Zorath turned toward her control panel and accessed the battle recordings again. The footage flickered to life, and she watched as humans refused to break, refused to surrender. Soldiers who fought to their last breath, even when the odds were impossible. Wounded fighters who dragged their comrades to safety instead of saving themselves. It was not just war. It was something else. Something Xal'Zorath's people had never understood. Something dangerous. She narrowed her eyes. This battle had changed everything. And she had a choice to make. The Council of the Xal'Zorath Empire. Hours later, Xal'Zorath stood before the Xal'Zorath High Council, deep within the command station orbiting their homeworld. The towering chamber was illuminated by a massive holographic projection of the galaxy, displaying all conquered territories of the Xal'Zorath Empire. At the center of the room, 12 Xal'Zorath elders observed her in silence, their expressions unreadable. Commander Xal'Zorath, one of them finally spoke, his voice measured and cold. Your forces retreated from Tarsus IV. This has never happened before. Xal'Zorath straightened. Yes, because we have never fought an enemy like this before. Another elder leaned forward, his mechanical implants glinting in the dim light. Are you suggesting that humans are a greater threat than we anticipated? Xal'Zorath met his gaze, unflinching. Yes. A murmur spread through the council. One elder scoffed. We have conquered empires, broken worlds. What makes these primitive creatures so dangerous? Xal'Zorath stepped forward. Because they do not fight for conquest, she said, her voice calm but sharp. They fight for each other. They fight even when the battle is lost. Even when surrender is logical, they resist. That is why we lost. Not because of their weapons, not because of their strategy, because of their will. Silence followed her words. Then the eldest elder, the supreme leader of the Xal'Zorath, leaned forward, his ancient eyes studying her. And do you fear them, Commander? He asked. Xal'Zorath hesitated. She had never feared an enemy before. But now, she thought of Reynolds' defiant gaze, of the human soldiers standing unbroken, of the ruins of Tarsus IV still defiant against the sky. Xal'Zorath clenched her fists. I do not fear them, she said, but I respect them. The elder nodded slowly. Then we must prepare, he said. Humanity cannot be allowed to rise. The council murmured in agreement. Plans were made. Orders were issued. The Xal'Zorath would return to crush humanity before they became an empire of their own. Xal'Zorath listened, her expression unreadable. But deep down, she knew something the council did not. Humanity was already rising, and the Xal'Zorath might be too late to stop it. A new future. Back on Tarsus IV, under the dim glow of a war-torn sunset, Reynolds and his soldiers stood over the wreckage of their fallen enemies. Their world was in ruins. Their bodies were exhausted, but their spirits were unbroken. And as he looked at the sky, where Xal'Zorath ships had once loomed, Reynolds made a promise. Next time, he muttered, we take the fight to them. Humanity would not wait for the next war. They would be ready. They would strike first. And this time, they would not stop until the Xal'Zorath Empire fell. The breaking point. The silence before the storm. Tarsus IV was quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. The kind that comes after a battle, when the dead have fallen, the fires have burned low, and only the wounded remain. Captain Reynolds walked through the ruins of what used to be a bustling colony, buildings reduced to rubble, streets torn apart by war, the air still thick with the scent of plasma burns and blood. His soldiers were repairing what they could, but they all knew the truth. This wasn't over. The Xerek would return. And next time, they wouldn't just be here to conquer. They would be here to wipe humanity from existence. Reynolds clenched his jaw. We won't let them. The Hidden War Council. Deep underground, beneath what was left of Tarsus IV's central command, a secret meeting was taking place. A dimly lit war room, holographic battle maps flickering, communications coming in from different sectors of human-controlled space. Admiral Leon Vargas stood at the center, his uniform still stained with ash from the battle. Across from him sat scientists, strategists, and military leaders, their faces grim. And then there was Reynolds, the man who had faced the Xerek firsthand. Let's skip the formalities, Vargas said, his voice rough. We don't have time for them. He turned toward the holographic display. A massive fleet was gathering near the Xerek homeworld. Dozens of warships, thousands of troops, weapons humanity had never seen before. They're mobilizing, Vargas continued. The Xerek Empire is preparing for a total extermination of humanity. A heavy silence fell over the room. Reynolds narrowed his eyes. So they're afraid of us, he said. Vargas gave a grim smile. Seems that way. Reynolds crossed his arms, glancing around at the others. And what's the plan? Sit and wait for them to come back. An uncomfortable murmur spread through the room. That was what humanity had always done. Wait, defend, try to survive. But after Tarsus IV, that wasn't an option anymore. A scientist at the far end of the table cleared her throat. Dr. Helena Clark, head of experimental weapons research. We might have another option, she said. She tapped a button on the holographic display. The screen shifted, showing a hidden human military project buried deep within a secret facility on Mars. The image revealed a fleet of prototype warships, unlike anything humanity had ever built. Sleek, powerful, armed with technology stolen from fallen Xerek war machines. A new kind of weapon. Project Nemesis, Clark said. We've spent years reverse engineering alien tech. The Xerek thought they were studying us. They had no idea. We were studying them. Reynolds leaned forward, his pulse quickening. This changes everything. Vargas nodded. Damn right it does. We're not just going to defend this time. He pointed at the map. We're taking the fight to them. Meanwhile, in the Xerek Empire, Commander Xyra stood in the war chambers of the High Council, her jaw tight, as she listened to the plans for humanity's destruction. The elders were determined. They would wipe Earth from the stars, erase every trace of human life before it could become a real threat. And yet, doubt gnawed at her. Xyra had seen something the elders had not. She had seen human soldiers fight. She had seen them adapt. She had seen them win. And deep down, a terrifying thought had taken root. What if humanity couldn't be stopped? She kept her face expressionless as the council continued their deliberations. Commander, the eldest elder finally said, you will lead the first strike against Earth. You will ensure humanity is crushed before they can retaliate. Xyra hesitated. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The ultimate war. The final battle. So why did it feel like she was walking into a trap? She straightened her shoulders, saluted, and bowed. As you command. But deep inside, she wasn't sure if the Xerek could truly win this war. For the first time in her life, she feared what was coming next. The countdown to war. Back on Tarsus IV, the war room was a storm of movement. Troops were being mobilized. Generals were shouting orders. Engineers were working around the clock to prepare Project Nemesis. Reynolds stood at the edge of the chaos, gripping his rifle. Sir, Diaz called out. We got the first set of warships ready for launch. Reynolds turned. How many? Not enough, Diaz admitted, but more than we've ever had before. Reynolds smirked. It'll do. Because this time, humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. They were fighting to win. And no empire, not even the Xal'Zorath, was ready for what was coming. Final words before war. Commander Xal'Zorath stood on the bridge of her warship, staring at the endless void of space. Somewhere out there, humans were preparing. She could feel it. She clenched her fists. For centuries, the Xal'Zorath had been the galaxy's most powerful force. But now they had something they had never faced before. An enemy that refused to break. An enemy that learned. An enemy that was coming for them. Her warship's engines roared to life, the fleet preparing for the final invasion of Earth. The war had begun. And for the first time, the Xal'Zorath weren't sure if they would win. The respect for humanity. The storm begins. The Xal'Zorath war fleet emerged from hyperspace, a vast armada of battle cruisers, dreadnoughts, and destroyers darkening the void above Earth. Their hulls gleamed under the distant glow of the sun, a testament to centuries of unchallenged conquest. Commander Xal'Zorath stood on the bridge of her flagship, her red eyes scanning the massive planet below. Earth. This was supposed to be the end of humanity. But something felt wrong. Her claws tapped against the metal console. The reports from their intelligence suggested that humans were scattered, weak, and still recovering from Tarsus IV. Yet her instincts screamed otherwise. Her fingers curled into fists. "Commander, we are receiving a transmission," her communications officer reported. Xal'Zorath frowned. From whom? From the human fleet. The bridge went silent. Xal'Zorath's eyes narrowed. Put it through. The main screen flickered, and then Captain Reynolds appeared. His face was calm, but his eyes carried that same defiant fire she had seen on Tarsus IV. "Commander Xal'Zorath," he said smoothly, "I see you brought your whole army. I'm honored." Xal'Zorath's lip curled. "You should be afraid, Captain. We will not offer surrender this time." Reynolds smirked. "That's fine. We weren't planning to surrender." Before Xal'Zorath could respond, the holographic display changed, showing new readings. Her eyes widened. Dozens of human warships were appearing from behind the shadow of Earth's moon. Then more. Then even more. Her blood ran cold. This wasn't a defensive force. This was a counterattack. "You?" she breathed. "You were expecting us." Reynolds nodded. "You thought we'd hide. Run? Beg for mercy." He leaned forward, his smirk fading into steely determination. "You don't understand humans at all." And with that, the final battle began. The clash of titans. The first wave of Xal'Zorath warships opened fire, unleashing a storm of plasma and energy blasts upon the human fleet. But humanity was ready. The new Nemesis-class warships, built from stolen Xal'Zorath technology, absorbed the first assault like an unshaken wall. Their shields flared, then held. Then they fired back. Railguns the size of buildings roared, electromagnetic rounds cutting through Xal'Zorath dreadnoughts like knives through flesh. Torpedo salvos ripped through enemy formations, detonating inside their ranks. The battle quickly descended into chaos. Inside the Earth Defense Fleet flagship, Reynolds gripped his console as the ship shook from an incoming blast. "Status report," he barked. "Shields holding at 70%. His tactical officer replied. "Xal'Zorath ships are adapting, but we're holding the line." "Good," Reynolds said. His eyes flickered to the holographic map, showing the battle unfolding in real time. The Xal'Zorath were still more advanced, still larger in number. But they had underestimated one thing. Humans didn't fight like other species. They fought like survivors, and survivors always found a way to win. Xal'Zorath's last stand. On her flagship, Xal'Zorath watched in growing horror as her fleet struggled. The humans were outmaneuvering them. They had learned from past battles, using unexpected tactics, precision strikes, and deception to dismantle Xal'Zorath formations. A group of human corvettes appeared to be retreating, only for them to loop around a Xal'Zorath destroyer and fire at its exposed rear. Human ships dodged plasma volleys with impossible precision, their pilots taking insane risks that no Xal'Zorath commander would ever dare. Xyra's warriors were breaking, and she knew why. They had always won battles by overwhelming force. They had never been forced to think, to adapt, to fight for survival. Not like humans. Her claws dug into the console. Was this how it felt? To fight an enemy you couldn't fully understand. To watch as they took everything you knew about war and rewrote the rules. A voice broke through her thoughts. "Commander," General Vec said hesitantly, "the Council is ordering us to retreat." Retreat. Again. Her pride screamed in protest. But her logic whispered the truth. They were losing. The Xal'Zorath Empire was losing. She exhaled slowly. "Order the fleet to fall back," she said bitterly. "We will regroup." Vec nodded, but there was fear in his eyes. Not of the humans, but of the future. Because if humanity could do this now, what would they become tomorrow? The new galactic power. As the Xal'Zorath fleet retreated, the humans did not celebrate. They did not cheer. They simply watched. They had fought for survival, and they had won. But Reynolds knew this was only the beginning. Humanity had faced extinction and survived. Now it was time to do more than survive. Now it was time to rise. He turned to his officers. "Prepare the fleet," he said. "We're going after them." There were murmurs of shock. Diaz, standing beside him, furrowed his brow. "Sir, you mean we're taking the fight to them?" Reynolds nodded. "The Xal'Zorath tried to end us." He looked out at the void, where the remnants of the Xal'Zorath fleet disappeared into hyperspace. "Now it's our turn." Xyra's final realization. Far away, aboard her crippled flagship, Xyra sat in silence, her claws tapping against the cold steel of her throne. She had mocked human frailty. Now she respected their strength, and though she would never admit it, she feared their future. She turned toward the holographic map of the galaxy. Humanity was small, but not for long. They had survived the impossible, and species who survive the impossible never stopped growing. A slow, bitter smirk crossed her lips. "Perhaps," she murmured, "we were the weak ones all along."